Good evening. We would like to talk about multilingualism today. See, Amy and I probably don't have a lot of things in common, except for the proximity of our houses. But if there's one thing that we have in common, it's the fact that we're both multilinguals. I grew up in, how many of you in this room would consider yourself a multilingual or bilingual? Let me see some hands. Me too. I would like to consider myself a bilingual who's trying to expand into being a multilingual. See, I grew up in Seoul, South Korea, a largely monocultural and monolingual society. And then I moved to Indonesia, where I learned to speak English and Indonesian.
I'd also deem myself a bilingual, but unlike Jewon, I grew up in a house that constantly switched between two languages, English and Hindi. Mainly because India can be considered a generally more multilingual society. Besides speaking those two languages at home, I also eventually started learning to speak Mandarin and Indonesian at school.
So how much do you know about multilingualism? And how much what you're thinking about multilingualism is actually wrong? Let's find out by counting down the top 8 myths of multilingualism. First, most of the world is largely monolingual.
That is wrong. Although most estimates show that 75% of the world speaks more than one language. That means despite the fact that most Western cultures are monolingual, majority of the world is actually multilingual. Another research done by Psychology Today showed that at least half of the world is fluently bilingual. That means about 3.5 billion people on this planet speak 2 languages in order to communicate every single day. This is mainly because children are now learning the regional and tribal languages of their country at the same time they learn the native language.
So how can one explain such large numbers of multilinguals? One reason is simply that some countries house many languages. 722 in Indonesia, 445 in India, 207 in Australia, and so on. Contact between communities mean learning another language, or at the very least, acquiring a common language of communication, and hence, being bilingual.
Other than that, business and trade has become an important factor for the rise of multilingualism. Having to communicate at an international level while only speaking your native language won't cut it. Other factors also include interracial marriages, the movement of people to different countries, as well as the rise in the need to communicate with people of different backgrounds. Myth number 2, the younger a person is, the easier it is to acquire a second language.
It is widely believed that young children are effective and efficient language learners. And as a result, it is also believed that they are able to acquire a second language more quickly and fairly effortlessly, and still attain a native-like proficiency through untutored, natural exposure to the language.
However, the link between age and second language acquisition is not linear. It's much more complex. This is mainly because there are other factors to consider.
Studies have shown that acquiring native-like pronunciation is much easier at a younger age.
However, other language learning tasks such as learning vocabulary, grammar, syntax, and literacy are way easier for older learners, mainly because they've already acquired these abilities in their native language, and so these abilities just simply transfer to their new language.
Nevertheless, age is only one of the factors determining the difficulty of second language acquisition. And other factors like motivation, the social context, and the learning environment itself also has a powerful impact on the degree to which one person can acquire a second language or not. Myth number 3. Learning 2 languages simultaneously only confuses children and impairs their cognitive abilities.
This myth is based on the assumption that our brains have a limited learning capacity, which they reach during some point of language acquisition. According to this myth, if your brain is already filled with one language, you might have to lose some parts of that language in order to gain space for a second language.
Contrary to this idea, there is evidence that well-developed bilingualism can actually enhance one's cognitive flexibility. That is, bilingual people, including children, are better able to see and understand things from different perspectives. Bilinguals also have better auditory language skills and develop faster than monolinguals in terms of language abstraction. For example, ability to think, talk about, and understand language.
Moreover, it is seen in some countries that children learn 2, 3, or even more languages without any cost to their educational development. Let's take Switzerland, for example. The home language in Switzerland may be French, Swiss German, Italian, or Romansh, but the children still graduate secondary school being trilinguals. Myth number 4. Multilingualism provides cognitive advantages.
Research has overwhelmingly shown that when a bilingual person uses one language, the other language is also active at the same time. Constantly switching back and forth between their two languages creates a need for the brain to control how much of a brain is accessed at a time. And this practice of constantly controlling how much the brain is accessed actually strengthens the control mechanisms and hence give cognitive advantages.
Multilinguals are also seen to perform better on inhibitory control, which is the ability to ignore competing perceptual information and only focus on the relevant aspects of the input. Multilinguals are also seen to do better at switching between two tasks as they do so more rapidly.
According to researchers in Northwestern University, brain imaging of bilinguals performing tasks in which they were forced to switch between their two languages showed an increased activation of dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, a brain region associated with cognitive abilities like attention and inhibition.
According to an experiment done on monolingual and bilingual teenagers, they were made to listen to simple speech sounds without any intervening background noise, and both groups had high neural responses. However, when the researchers introduced background noises, the multilingual teenagers were shown to have higher neural responses. This shows that multilinguals perform better in coding of auditory information.
These cognitive advantages may help multilinguals to better focus or process information. This would allow them to more easily access newly learned words, leading to greater vocabulary size. What is even more fascinating is that these cognitive advantages have been shown in infants as young as 7 months. Myth number 5. Exposure to more than one language causes the child to mix the languages together.
It is definitely true that language mixing or code mixing is common in multilingual children. This is when you use words from 2 different languages in the same sentence.
Many people believe that young children, when learning 2 languages simultaneously, go through a stage where they treat both of their languages as being part of a single system. And according to this belief, a bilingual child should be making many ungrammatical sentences since their grammatical system haven't been differentiated yet. For example, instead of saying, I want to go, a bilingual child might say, I want to go.
However, many studies show that this hypothesis is incorrect. According to studies done on French-English bilingual children in Montreal, it showed that language mixing and code mixing only occurred less than 4.1% of the time.
The studies also showed that the children are able to use their languages appropriately with their parents, as well as strangers.
Furthermore, this phenomenon was only seen to be temporary, and as the child increases their vocabulary and grammar in this language, the code mixing or language mixing eventually disappears. Myth number 6. Knowledge attained in one language is not accessible in another language.
This myth comes from an idea that there seem to be some words in certain languages that simply do not exist in other languages.
See, knowledge is not languages. Knowledge is the concepts and ideas and understandings, and language is just the way we transfer or comprehend these ideas in our brains. Knowledge is not stored in our brain in the format of a language. Your brain is incapable of holding the journals and essays you wrote for a history class last week, or the list of ingredients that were used in making your breakfast in the morning.
So let's look at some examples. The German word Schadenfreude, for instance, refers to the feeling of pleasure one gets by seeing another's misfortune. Now, I'm pretty sure we've all felt this before, but just because there's no word for it in English doesn't mean the thought doesn't exist. Myth number 7, multilingualism can delay onset of dementia and mental deterioration such as Alzheimer's disease.
Many studies actually support this hypothesis. According to a special lecture done in India, cognitive neuroscientists said that the onset of diseases like Alzheimer's and language brain disorders like dementia on bilingual patients was at least 4 years later than monolingual patients.
Bilingual speakers always practice a kind of brain gymnastics of having to select the correct language and suppress the other, which stimulates many different parts of the brain throughout their lives. And this is most likely the reason why bilinguals and multilinguals have higher protection against dementia and other language disorders. Myth number 8, learning more languages does not make one smarter. Instead, only smarter people can learn more languages.
This was actually one of the most challenging problems that neurologists and linguists face when studying multilingualism. They couldn't tell whether learning more languages made you smarter or that smarter people tended to learn more languages.
853 native English speakers from Edinburgh, Scotland were given an intelligence test in 1947 at age 11 and then again at age 76. The results showed that those who spoke more than 2 languages had better cognitive abilities than what was expected when they were 11. This only goes on to prove that it is never too late to learn a new language and hopefully become smart.
Going through all of these myths, debunking some of them and proving others right, was honestly a quite eye-opening experience for both of us. If there's something we want you guys to take away from this TED Talk here tonight, it's appreciation. Appreciation towards languages. Who knew while we were complaining about those French essays that we keep having to write or those Chinese dictations that never seem to end? These languages were actually making us more smarter and more intellectual and also decreasing our chances of getting dangerous brain diseases. It honestly wouldn't hurt to learn another language.
It's not only the effects on the brain to consider, it's the effect on life. Languages have the ability to widen your understanding of the world. And once you learn a new language, it doesn't only expand your knowledge on the language itself, but also the culture behind it.
This quote from Frank Smith is something we'd like to depart you with here tonight. One language sets you in a corridor for life.
2 languages open every door along the way. Thank you.